this episode, we move from choosing and designing controls into the harder and more practical part of the work, because a control that looks sensible on paper only begins to matter when real people put it into operation and keep it working over time. Brand new learners often assume that once a safeguard has been approved, the organization is automatically safer, but that is not how risk management works in the real world. The value of a control depends not only on the idea behind it, but on whether it is implemented correctly, understood by the people affected by it, supported by management, and maintained as conditions change. That is why collaboration with control owners matters so much at this stage. The control owner is usually the person or group accountable for making sure the control exists, functions as intended, and continues to serve its purpose. So working closely with that owner helps turn a security concept into something stable, usable, and dependable inside everyday business operations. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is to understand the difference between control design and control implementation, because beginners often blend those two ideas together. Design is about deciding how a control should work and what objective it is meant to achieve, while implementation is about putting that design into place in a real environment with real systems, real processes, and real people. That shift sounds simple, but it introduces a great deal of complexity. A well-designed control may still fail if responsibilities are unclear, timing is poor, supporting processes are weak, or the people using it do not understand what is expected of them. Collaboration with control owners becomes essential here because they usually know the environment better than anyone reading a risk document from a distance. They understand where work actually happens, where delays commonly appear, where exceptions are frequent, and where a control may fit naturally or cause unintended disruption. So their involvement helps keep implementation grounded in reality instead of theory. Control implementation is rarely just a technical event, even when technology is involved. It is often a business change that affects how decisions are made, how approvals happen, how data is handled, or how employees perform routine tasks. That is why implementation should be viewed as a managed transition rather than a simple switch from absent to present. A risk professional may understand why the control is needed, but the control owner usually sees how the new safeguard will interact with existing workflows, staffing levels, deadlines, and service expectations. If that perspective is ignored, the control can create resistance, confusion, or quiet workarounds that weaken its value. Good collaboration helps both sides prepare for those realities. The goal is not merely to install a safeguard and declare success. The goal is to introduce the control in a way that preserves business continuity, builds user understanding, reduces confusion, and increases the chance that the control will actually be followed and supported once the first phase of attention passes. One of the first practical questions in implementation is whether the control is ready to be introduced as designed, because some controls depend on supporting conditions that may not exist yet. A new review step may require clearer role definitions. A new approval checkpoint may depend on better documentation. A stronger access restriction may require process changes so normal work can still continue without constant exception handling. Control owners are often the people who can see these dependencies most clearly, and that makes collaboration especially valuable before rollout begins. A beginner may think the organization should move quickly and sort out issues later, but weak preparation can damage both the control and confidence in future control efforts. When the control owner and risk professional plan together, they can identify prerequisites, align timing, and determine whether interim steps are needed before the full control goes live. That kind of preparation helps prevent the common problem of a control being blamed for failures that were really caused by missing support structures. Implementation also depends on clarity of roles, because confusion about who does what is one of the easiest ways for a control to become inconsistent. A control may require one team to review activity, another team to approve action, and a manager to resolve exceptions. But if those relationships are not understood, the control can weaken almost immediately. Control owners help bring this clarity because they know how responsibilities are actually distributed in the environment where the control will operate. That distribution may not match the neat picture imagined during planning. Some tasks may already be overloaded, some roles may overlap, and some approvals may happen informally rather than through clearly defined channels. Collaboration helps reveal those realities so the control can be implemented with responsibility that is visible and realistic. For new learners, this is an important lesson because strong controls are not sustained by good intentions alone. They are sustained by clear accountability, and accountability becomes much easier when the control owner helps define exactly how the work will be performed and supervised. Communication during implementation is just as important as the control itself, because people rarely support what they do not understand. If employees, managers, or process participants experience a new safeguard as a surprise, a burden, or an unexplained obstacle, they are more likely to resist it or try to work around it. The control owner can help shape communication in a way that matches the audience, since that person usually understands which groups need detail, which groups need context, and which groups simply need clear expectations. A risk professional may focus on the reason the control reduces exposure, while the control owner may explain how the change affects day-to-day work and how people should respond when the control interrupts a routine action. That balance is valuable. It helps people see that the control is not random or punitive, but tied to a business and risk need. Strong communication makes implementation smoother because it reduces uncertainty, increases acceptance, and helps the organization understand that the control is part of responsible operations rather than a disconnected security demand. Training and awareness often sit close to communication, but they deserve separate attention because knowledge gaps can quietly undermine even a well-planned implementation. A control may seem straightforward to the people who designed it, yet still be misunderstood by those expected to carry it out. A reviewer may not know what to look for. A manager may not know when escalation is required. An employee may not understand the difference between an ordinary exception and a serious control failure. The control owner is usually well positioned to identify where deeper instruction is needed and where simple awareness is enough. Collaboration at this stage helps avoid both extremes, which are undertraining and overtraining. Undertraining leaves people confused, while overtraining can bury the important message under too much detail. For a beginner, the key point is that implementation is not complete just because a process or system has changed. Implementation is only mature when the people affected know what the control is for, what part they play in it, and how to respond when normal conditions do not hold. Another important part of implementation is validating that the control works as intended when it enters real use. This is not just about whether a system feature appears to function. It is about whether the control achieves the desired effect under normal conditions and whether the surrounding process supports it consistently. A control owner can help test that reality by observing actual workflow, gathering feedback, and identifying where the control behaves differently from what was expected. Sometimes the issue is not that the control fails completely, but that it creates delays, unnecessary manual effort, or unclear exception paths that will weaken it over time if left unresolved. Collaboration helps surface those concerns early, when adjustment is still easier and confidence has not yet been lost. Beginners sometimes imagine implementation as a clean finish line, but in practice it often includes a period of refinement. That refinement is not a sign that the organization made a poor decision. It is often evidence that the organization is paying attention closely enough to make the control workable instead of pretending that first attempts are always perfect. Once a control is in place, maintenance becomes the next challenge, and maintenance is where many organizations either prove maturity or slowly lose it. Control maintenance means the continuing care needed to keep the safeguard relevant, functioning, and aligned with the environment it protects. It may involve reviewing performance, updating documentation, retraining staff, adjusting for process changes, replacing obsolete steps, or revisiting ownership when responsibilities shift. Beginners sometimes think of controls as fixed objects, but most controls exist inside living systems and processes that change over time. A control that worked well a year ago may now sit in a redesigned workflow, depend on outdated assumptions, or rely on people who no longer hold the same roles. The control owner plays a central role here because maintenance is rarely a one-time project. It is ongoing stewardship. Collaboration with the risk function helps ensure that this stewardship remains connected to risk priorities rather than turning into routine maintenance without strategic awareness of why the control exists in the first place. Control drift is one of the biggest reasons maintenance matters. Drift happens when a control gradually stops working as originally intended, even though nobody formally decided to weaken it. This can happen because workloads increase, shortcuts become normal, business priorities change, system updates alter a process, or exceptions accumulate until the original safeguard is barely recognizable. Control owners are often the first people who can notice these changes if they are paying attention, but they also need partnership from risk professionals to understand why seemingly small changes may matter more than they appear. A small delay in review may eventually become a routine backlog. A temporary exception may become permanent. A manual step added as a stopgap may introduce new error risk. Maintenance includes watching for these patterns and acting before the control becomes decorative instead of effective. For new learners, this is an important idea because a failing control does not always announce itself dramatically. Sometimes it fades slowly, and good collaboration helps the organization see that fading early enough to correct it. Exceptions and failures are another normal part of control life, and mature maintenance does not treat them as rare embarrassments that should be hidden. Any real control environment will encounter situations where the control cannot be followed exactly, where it produces an unexpected result, or where it fails to prevent the issue it was meant to address. The control owner is essential in handling those moments because that person often knows whether the problem represents a one-time anomaly, a training gap, a process flaw, or a deeper design weakness. Collaboration helps move the conversation beyond blame. The goal is to learn what happened, assess whether the control is still appropriate, and determine whether corrective action is needed. Beginners sometimes assume that a control failure automatically means the control should be discarded, but that is not always true. Sometimes the response is to strengthen oversight, improve escalation, refine the process, or address a dependency that was overlooked. Maintenance is strongest when exceptions and failures are treated as information that can improve the control rather than as noise to be ignored. Resources and management support matter throughout both implementation and maintenance, because controls do not sustain themselves through good policy language alone. A control may require review time, oversight effort, process discipline, system support, and leadership attention, and if those needs are not recognized, the control can weaken even if everyone agrees it is important. The control owner often sees this pressure most clearly because that person lives closest to the ongoing cost of operating the safeguard. Collaboration with the risk function helps make those resource needs visible to decision-makers in business terms. A control that protects something important but receives no continuing support is unlikely to remain effective for long. This does not mean every control must be expensive or heavily staffed. It means organizations should be honest about what is required to keep the safeguard healthy. For beginners, this helps explain why maintenance is not merely administrative housekeeping. It is a continuing business commitment to preserve the control's purpose, not just its existence on a diagram or in a policy. Another sign of mature collaboration is the willingness to revisit a control when the business changes instead of defending the old approach simply because it once seemed reasonable. New products, reorganizations, vendor changes, mergers, regulatory changes, and technology shifts can all alter whether a control still fits its environment. Control owners often see these shifts early because they are close to operational change, while risk professionals may see how the change affects exposure more broadly. When those perspectives meet, the organization can adjust the control before problems compound. This could mean simplifying a process, strengthening oversight, moving a control point, or even retiring a control that no longer adds value and replacing it with something more suitable. Beginners sometimes think mature organizations keep adding controls endlessly, but maturity more often looks like purposeful adaptation. The best control environment is not the one with the most safeguards. It is the one where safeguards remain aligned with real risks, real business conditions, and real patterns of work over time. There is also a cultural side to implementation and maintenance that deserves attention, because controls survive more effectively in environments where people understand their purpose and believe responsible operation matters. If the surrounding culture treats controls as annoying formalities, employees may comply only when watched and ignore the spirit of the safeguard whenever pressure rises. The control owner influences that culture through tone, expectations, follow-up, and daily reinforcement. Collaboration with risk professionals can strengthen that effort by keeping the control tied to meaningful business and risk outcomes rather than allowing it to become just another routine task. When people understand that a safeguard protects customers, supports reliable operations, or prevents costly disruption, they are more likely to take it seriously. For a beginner, this is a useful reminder that implementation and maintenance are not only process activities. They are also human activities shaped by leadership, clarity, repetition, and the visible seriousness with which the organization treats control responsibilities over time. As all of this comes together, the central lesson is that collaborating with control owners on control implementation and maintenance is about making sure safeguards do not stop at the level of good ideas. Implementation turns design into real operation, and maintenance keeps that operation meaningful as people, processes, and conditions evolve. The control owner brings practical knowledge, operational accountability, and insight into how the safeguard lives inside daily work, while the risk perspective helps keep the control tied to the exposure it is meant to manage. When those roles collaborate well, the organization is far more likely to introduce controls smoothly, support them consistently, notice drift early, and adapt them when needed. That is what mature control management looks like in practice. For someone new to this field, the most important takeaway is simple but powerful. A control creates value not when it is approved, and not even when it is first introduced, but when it is carried forward with enough care, clarity, and partnership to remain effective day after day.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.